Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is March 29th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope everyone is doing well. So a couple of stories that we're going to touch on today is really just an update to some of what the mainstream media is now doing, especially in regards to President Trump and the Mueller investigation and all of that mania that's been going on. Because as we've discussed earlier this week, the ratings, especially on MSNBC and CNN, have been going down, down, down. Why? Because they've been lied to. The people have been lied to by the hosts and the quote-unquote journalists on those broadcast stations. It's a true shame. Anybody with two brain cells to rub together knew very well during this entire investigation, which turned out to be a witch hunt, in fact, led to nothing. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction of justice. But what we have here is a complete distrust in the institutions of the United States of America. Now, ironically, that's what this whole country was founded on, distrust of institutions, especially institutions of power. So we might actually be in the midst here of a hopeful, peaceful revolution where people say, you know what, enough of this, we have to move forward. But as we're seeing here from the Democrats, especially the names that we rattle off here all the time, particularly Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff, they're digging in deeper. They are not done attempting to investigate this president, his campaign, and his administration. We will continue to see this additional witch hunt in the halls of Congress on the Democrat side for months to come. I especially believe this to be true at least for the next several months. Probably will definitely get us through spring, quite possibly summer. Again, the only thing that I think will stop their investigations will be President Trump saying, now it's my turn, and he declassifies documents. He declassifies FISA information. He declassifies FBI 302s, which are summaries of interviews and investigations, and a whole host of other things that we may not even be aware of. Not to mention, we still have the Inspectors General reports slated to come out, hopefully sooner rather than later. And again, I say hopefully sooner rather than later because enough is enough. Let's allow the sunlight to be the disinfectant that it needs to be on these corrupt individuals and on these corrupt institutions. And again, it isn't the whole lot of them. It isn't all Democrats. It isn't all members of the Obama administration. It isn't all members of the FBI. And the list goes on and on. But there are definitely people who have abused their power, have treated it as a privilege, have treated it as if it's more than a privilege. It was their entitlement, which it wasn't. They were granted power by people who voted for them. Some of the bureaucrats were not voted for. So that's a whole other can of worms that we have to investigate and go down those roads. Because people need to be held accountable. Because people's lives were ruined during this investigation of Trump, Russia collusion, obstruction of justice, the whole lot, the whole gambit. People really need to seriously wake up because it's getting dangerous. And now not only do you have Democrats in Congress continuing to dig in deeper and to investigate this president, his campaign, his administration, his business dealings, his family, his charities. Again, the president and all of those people that I've just rattled off, they're not above the law. But we just had a investigation wrap up that took 2 years, tens of millions of dollars, and we got nothing for it. Now, all of a sudden, these quote-unquote geniuses have additional information that they're going to spring on the American people. They're going to spring it on the Trump campaign, President Trump himself, his administration, and now that'll be it. He is going to be in handcuffs. He will be indicted. He will most definitely be charged. He will be impeached. This is not going to take place. It's just not. It's a sick dream for people who are still crying foul that they lost going on 3 years ago. And they're going to lose again, most likely. Still my opinion. So not only is it the Democrats digging in, it's also some, not all, but some, as you watch some of the media, especially on MSNBC and CNN, some of these commentators are digging in as well. They refuse to give up. They refuse to admit that they were wrong. That their analysis, if that's the word you want to use, you have to use it loosely because their analysis was it was terrible. I don't think it was analysis. I think it was a narrative that they just wanted to spin. They're making millions of dollars reading a teleprompter. They wanted to tell the crybabies out there that are still upset that President Trump is the president that, look, we're going to get him. You just have to hold out hope. Just stay with me, guys. Just stay with me. And that's what they're continuing to say, despite the fact that their ratings are plunging. Couldn't care less. Now, maybe they're delusional. Maybe they just think that if they just continue with it, it will eventually magically happen. If I just say it enough times, it's going to happen. Not so. Not so. And I'm not here to defend these people or to say, well, change your mind and then get your ratings back up. No, I am talking about institutions, especially here in regards to the press. They have an immense amount of power, perhaps rightly so, but they also have an immense amount of responsibility. Again, most people are out working 30, 40, 50 plus hours a week. They want to come home. Maybe they want to stay in tune with what's going on in the world. They turn on a station. Maybe, yeah, they're biased. Maybe they lean left and they want to watch MSNBC a little bit more than they watch CNN or Fox. That's fine. Just like it's fine if somebody leans more to the conservative side and they watch Fox more than they do CNN or MSNBC. That's fine. But when you watch somebody a little bit more and you don't hear the other side and you just get into that groupthink, well, this is what happens. This is why people are surprised. This is why people, I'm sure some people are depressed because we know they were depressed and shocked when President Trump became the president. I mean, we're continuing to see this is almost rising to a national crisis because we have series to be discussed and debated, which are the topics that this program seeks to discuss all the time and to mention because nobody else is bringing it up. Because everybody else wants to focus on a soap opera. They don't want to focus on the real issues. That is a crisis. Whether that's illegal immigration, whether that's human and sex trafficking, whether that's the drug and opioid crisis in this country, whether it's the crumbling infrastructure, whether it's the national debt, the deficits, demographics that are pushing this country off a cliff that nobody talks about, Social Security, Medicare. Where's the discussion? Where's the debate? It isn't. There isn't one. Instead, we want to talk about spending $100 trillion on a Green New Deal that destroys the entire economy. Instead, we want to talk about a man, a family, a campaign, an administration that did not collude with a foreign government, that did not obstruct justice. But that's what we continue to focus on. That, football, March Madness, these are the important things in the United States of America. Are you surprised then that we have the problems that we do? When the people start to lose the trust of the media, we're in for a world of hurt. Because people are trying to make a living. When they come home, they want to stay in tune. They want to say, okay, these people are honest people because they're journalists. And they're to be held in high regard because they are supposed to speak truth. Not just truth to power, which I don't ever get that saying. You got to speak truth to power. Why isn't it just speak the truth, period? It shouldn't matter who you're talking to or about. Just speak the truth. So just speak the truth. These journalists are supposed to just speak the truth. Now, I understand there are commentators out there. There are people who put their opinion out there. That's what I am. I'm not a journalist. I'm a commentator. I'm somebody who looks at all of this information and tries to paint a picture of what's going on, tries to make sense of all of it, tries to find solutions to it, tries to root cause the problems. Say, hey, we got to look down this road because this is a problem that's brewing or it already exists, but here's how we can maybe solve it. That's what this program's about. Now, a lot of people on MSNBC, Fox, CNN, all alike, they will say the same thing. However, we know that at least a lot of the pundits on MSNBC and CNN have been lying. And I don't use that word lightly because all it would have taken was a little bit of investigation of things that were already in the public domain. If you know that the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC and Fusion GPS worked together to create this dossier. Again, what we're finding out now is Christopher Steele, the former British spy, may just have been a go-between. Can we use your name, Mr. Steele? Yeah, you can use my name. Call it whatever you want. Well, we're going to call it the Steele dossier. Splendid. Just pay me X amount of dollars. And that's what they did. They wrote it, trying to get dirt on the president, which, again, that's politics. That's been going on since day one. You want to find dirt on your opponent? That's what you do. It's not the best thing in the world, but that's who we are. That's the game. You don't like it, don't pay attention, don't get involved with it. But if you do, you got to live with it, because that's what people do when it comes to politics. They're looking for dirt. They don't just want to debate the issues. They want to see what you've done 30, 40, 50 years ago and say, look, that's the same person. Nobody's allowed to make a mistake. And that is what scares away really good people from getting into office and running, because they don't want to have their name dragged through the mud. Maybe they did something when they were in college, or whenever it was a mistake. It would be humiliating. It might be embarrassing. And they just don't want that aired out in the public. And who can blame them? So who do we end up getting in office? People who are either so egotistical or they're sociopaths or psychopaths. That's who we have. And then when you look at the reality that we have, can you be surprised of the mess we're in? You can't be surprised, because we have egotistical, narcissists, sociopathic, and psychopaths at the helm. Now it all starts to make sense, doesn't it? So we have a crisis brewing in this country. It's been brewing. But now when you have a president who is talking about fake media, and there most definitely is, however, that's even dangerous to have that, because now a lot of people just take it whole cloth that there is no truth from certain media organizations, which is not true. So we have to be delicate here, because we're on the cliff's edge, and it's going to be a long way down. So pay attention, focus on all of these issues the best you can, and do your best to get information from everywhere. Don't just focus in on Fox News. Don't just focus in on MSNBC. Don't just listen to those on CNN. Don't just read a certain newspaper or news magazine or website. Check out a few. It doesn't take that long to flick the station over for a half an hour, see what they're saying. See what they're saying. And if it's crazy, it's crazy. Okay. Sometimes that's what you're going to hear. But sometimes you're going to hear something else and you say, "Whoa, they don't talk about that on the other station. Maybe I'll go look somewhere else to see if that's the case." Because you have to. We have 7 billion people in this world. It's a 24/7 news cycle, and they want to keep talking about the same couple stories as if that's the only thing that's going on in the world. So you have to broaden your horizons. You have to look outside of your groupthink, because everybody falls into it, and go get some different perspectives. But I just want to bring this to the front here, because this ain't going away. It is not going to go away, especially given the fact that we are in the midst of the 2020 presidential campaign. So just keep this not in the back of your mind, but in the front of your mind, because this is very important. The institution of the press is a very important one. It's extremely important. If we can't trust these people to tell us the truth and to be objective, we're in a lot of trouble. Now, some of the other news today, well, it's March 29th. This was supposed to be the last day for Brexit. A deal was supposed to be made, or it was supposed to be a no deal, and it was going to be a hard Brexit. Well, we have neither, of course, because they kicked the can further down the road. But today, we did have the third vote, the third try, and it was not a charm for Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the UK. Her deal was shot down once again for the third time. So where does this leave us? Well, we have another deadline, obviously. We have now April 12th. Had her deal passed, they would have had until May 22nd. It didn't pass, so now they have until April 12th. It's only a couple weeks away. What are they going to do? I have no idea. I don't think anybody in the UK knows what's going to take place, because it's in shambles. This is what this is like to me. They haven't even left yet, and people are crying foul. It's sort of like, in an analogy, if you will, public speaking. Public speaking is one of the biggest fears of everybody. It's like the most common denominator of everybody. That's like everybody's biggest fear. It's not that bad of a deal. But to a lot of people, I understand it, and they get very worked up. They get anxious. But then, a lot of times once you get up and you start talking, it's just fine. You're fine. It was the buildup, the anxiety that got you worked up, that got you in a tizzy, that had you throwing a hissy fit. That's the same thing here. They haven't even left. They haven't even left the European Union, and they're all throwing hissy fits. Leave. See what happens. Give it some time. It might be better. I think it will be better. But maybe it won't. There's always the possibility that it isn't. And if that's the case, after some time, and I don't mean a couple months, I mean a few years, if things are really that bad and you really think, as a people, that it's better to get back in the European Union, then if you want to have another referendum to get back in, I guess you do it. Now, I'd think that would be crazy, because I don't expect the EU to exist much longer, especially not in its current form. I don't expect the euro, the currency, to be around much longer either, or at least not in its current form. So I think the British people are fine to leave. They will be fine. But this is just a soap opera that keeps going and going and going. Because, to my understanding, what took place today is there are two parts to the deal. Theresa May's deal. You have a political deal aspect of it, which nobody seems to like. And then you have also a withdrawal agreement. Now, according to Theresa May's government and her Attorney General, that is not going to be changed. The withdrawal agreement, no matter what happens, is not going to be changed. It will be there no matter what, because that has been negotiated with the EU, and supposedly the EU, given all of the legal shenanigans that's been taking place and that will take place, that's it. They're not going to budge on that. At least that's what Theresa May's government is arguing. It didn't matter. It still got shot down today. So this basically leaves us and the British people up in the air to scramble for a last-minute deal to see, perhaps, if the EU will grant them another extension. Now, again, it will have to be all 27 nations of the European Union that are on board and say, yeah, we'll give you another extension. But you have to remember, the May 22nd extension was given because the day after is the beginning of the EU parliamentary elections. So now you start to get into the politics of this. This is the cynicism of this whole thing. This is the backroom deals, the underhandedness of all of this. Because what's going to take place? Because it's my opinion that the EU wants one of two things. They either want a no-deal Brexit, because given all of the fear-mongering, that is the worst-case scenario for the British people. And I told you the EU does not want this to be smooth sailing for the British people, because then other countries who might be thinking about leaving will say, well, it was smooth sailing for the Brits, so it'll be smooth sailing for us. No. They want it to be as bumpy as possible. So that's why they are saying, well, it's most likely going to be a no-deal Brexit. The other thing that they might want, and this goes to more of the other cynicism and underhandedness, is they may want the British people to stay in the European Union, therefore completely undermining the will of the people in the referendum vote back in 2016, and saying, no, okay, here's what we got. Now, they couldn't pass this deal because it was supposedly terrible. Nobody wanted it in the British House, so it got shut down, not once, twice, but 3 times. Okay, now, here's what we can do, somehow, maybe. Get somebody else to put forth another deal that does get passed, that basically keeps the Brits in the EU. It's a long extension. It's a deal. Maybe we see if you can make a general election take place. Because you have to remember, Prime Minister Theresa May was willing to fall on the sword and say if this passed, she would resign. Now, of course, it would have been somebody else in her Conservative Party who would have been elected to the Prime Minister position, and that wouldn't have solved anything. It just would have removed Theresa May. If she was a contentious figure in all of this, at least she would have been removed. It just would have been, new boss, same as the old boss type thing. Would have been the same thing. But maybe the EU is hoping that somehow somebody can make a maneuver to get another general election. And through the general election, then somehow they can maneuver to get a second referendum to hopefully get people to vote in the majority to remain in the European Union. Again, if that does take place somehow, some way, the British people, it is incumbent on them, those who understand the fundamentals and the institution of democracy, they must revolt. Because if they don't revolt in such a scenario, meaning a second referendum, and the will of the people in 2016 is overturned, and now people want to remain in the EU, the people in the UK must revolt. They must, because the death of Western civilization and democratic institutions, that's a death blow. That is the beginning of the end. So you can't have it. You can't have it for a second. I'm just telling you, you can't have it. This is the same thing with what I just said with the institutions of a free press. You cannot have these types of institutions collapsing, because these are what keeps freedom alive. You have to pay attention to it. I told you this is historic. It got shut down. So what's going to happen? Is this going to be a hard Brexit on April 12th? Because I don't know what the British people are going to come up with in a couple weeks. Now, you have to remember, it was on Wednesday we discussed those indicative votes. This was the attempt by British Parliament to overtake Theresa May and take control of this whole Brexit process. And they threw up 8 different amendments. All 8 got voted down. So not one passed. On Monday, those votes are supposed to come back into play. Which one, if any of them, will actually get through this time, I have no idea. I mean, there is going to be a whole bunch of backroom deals going on this weekend to see if somebody can come up with enough votes for at least one of these amendments. Will that go through? I don't know, because I still believe that remains in the hands of the Prime Minister and her government to determine whether or not that goes through or not. So it's very interesting. It is extremely interesting. This is one for the history books no matter what happens. Now, if there is somehow, again, a second referendum, that is definitely one for the history books. That starts to become a final nail in the coffin of democratic institutions. You didn't vote the way we wanted, so go back, children, and continue to vote until you vote the way we want you to. That is disgusting. That is the antithesis of a democratic institution. Disgusting. Can't have it, cannot stand for it. So we're going to keep you guys updated on this. Monday is going to be very interesting because we're going to see if any of those votes come through. This weekend is going to be very interesting because there's going to be a lot of discussions, no doubt, amongst the members of the British Parliament, but also the bureaucracy within the EU, because it's come to my attention that the European Council President, Donald Tusk, has called an emergency EU summit for April 10th, which is just a couple days before the deadline. So what are they going to try to do? How are they going to pivot? Are they going to try to say, okay, well, you know what? We have to give these guys an additional extension, meaning past May 22nd? Well, if you're going past May 22nd, then you are going to have the British people take part in the European parliamentary elections. And I really don't know if the EU wants that to take place either. Because if you do, you're going to probably get a lot of people from the UK who get elected to the European Parliament who don't want to be there. So there are going to be what is basically termed Eurosceptics. Eurosceptics, like Nigel Farage. I mention him every once in a while. That type of mentality. But you're going to have more of them. They cannot want that type of drama. That's why they set the deadline to May 22nd and not June 30th, which is what Theresa May had originally asked for. So it's getting interesting. It is very interesting. It's a great time to be alive to see all this stuff. But we have to hope and pray to God that, people have a voice. They have a vote. They expressed their opinion 3 years ago. It is incumbent upon their representatives through their government to deliver on Brexit. And let's hope that they do. All right, everybody, I'm going to let you go. Enjoy your weekend. Hopefully it's a nice weekend wherever you are. Get some sunshine. Get some exercise. I'll catch you guys here next week. As always, it's been a pleasure having you. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out, and we'll catch you next time. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.